Hey guys, tonight's Danny Batten fight show is dedicated to friend of the channel, Mr. Neil Campbell, who unfortunately lost his life last night. Obviously, Neil's brother Andy is a big part of what A.C.E Podcast Nation has become. The A.C.E Footy Show was obviously one of our biggest shows as well, currently on hiatus. But all of our thoughts, love, and prayers are with Andy, his partner, his children, obviously Neil's parents, and most of all, Neil's children. It's a very difficult time for them, and we're sending them all the strength that is possible. And tonight's show is dedicated to Neil. Rest easy, my friend.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show, powered by Violent Money, as always. And of course, you can check out Violent Money TV on YouTube, the Violent Money website, which is violentmoney.co.uk. And we have a 20% discount code, which you can use there to get 20% off all their products and apparel, including their latest drop, which is collaboration with Weekend Defender. And don't forget to give them a follow on social media, all that good stuff. And check out the Violent Money Academy, which is the first smart gym in the UK. And again, you can find out more information on social media. We are live exclusively on YouTube now. We've been promising for weeks that we was just going to be a YouTube series, and it is. But you can get the audio version of this series and all the other series we do at Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated sport podcast network. You can find this show tomorrow, as well as all of our previous shows and interviews with various MMA, kickboxing, boxing, guests, coaches, fighters, all this good stuff. Lots of exclusive interviews there, so check them out. All the previous shows, Danny Batten Fight Show, you'll find it everywhere, podcast platforms. But joining me, as ever, first and foremost, is the man himself. He's a former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend, Mr. Danny Batten. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, silent listeners. I'm good and raring to go.
Raring to go. Lots to talk about, and we got a couple of guests this evening, which is always good. And our first guest of the evening, you will have seen him over the years, featured in the UFC, Cage Rays, BAMA, pretty much everywhere else which is possible to fight MMA. I think he fought at lightweight, welterweight, and middleweight. Of course, he is none other than the man himself, the One John Maguire. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, and thanks for having me on the show.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Been really looking forward to it. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I really enjoy having the new guests. Like, we've got some guests who've been on a couple of times, but I always enjoy speaking to someone new, especially someone who me personally haven't spoken to a lot. So it's a great pleasure to have you join us, mate. I guess first and foremost, what have you been up to recently?
To be fair, I've just been recovering from a back surgery. I had a back operation. I had
Okay.
bulging discs, and with the whole situation going over the last couple of years, couldn't see no GP, no doctors, couldn't get in anywhere, so it took a long time, and ended up going private in the end just to get round it all. So that's all.
Yeah, you just got to do it just to get it done.
Yeah, just to get it done. They had an emergency waiting list for scan. I couldn't even get a scan out to go private in the end because they wouldn't let me through the GP's door, as you can imagine. A lot of people's having the same problem, but I couldn't walk. Literally couldn't walk, and all they were giving me just pain meds. Take this, take that, and it wasn't even working, so it wasn't even worth it. So I stopped taking them. So that's what I've been battling with.
Oh, yeah, and I tell you what, you're speaking to someone who's been through it. That myself, like it's I was in hospital for 2 weeks, like in the actual hospital, because I couldn't feel from my knee downwards. I had no feeling whatsoever, which had kind of been building through back pain. And they did all the scans under the sun, and then said, "Oh, we can't find anything. There's nothing wrong." But they gave me crutches and a wheelchair and like a load of morphine, but there's nothing wrong. And it's like, surely there's something wrong if I can't walk. And that was a long-winded thing. Ended up I needed spinal fusion, and because they did, because they told me to do physio twice a week, I did a load more damage. So because it all happened because one of the scans that they did was blurred, and instead of going to do it again, they basically just sent me on my way. And yeah, it's very disappointing, I gotta say. Which, you know, as Danny, as you know, mate, it's caused me all sorts of issues in the years gone by. But I look back, I wish I had gone private, because I would have, one, got it sorted quicker, and two, probably wouldn't have had the long-term issues that I had, just because they were trying to free a bed up, basically. How has it been in the recovery since you've had that operation then, John? Has it been better?
It's not too slow as you can imagine. Frustrating because I can't do what I want to do, what I'm used to doing. I was like it for a year, bent over, couldn't move, couldn't do jiu-jitsu, couldn't do anything. Just depressed, laying, getting fatter and fatter, just laying, looking at the ceiling. And finally got it done, and now it's just a slow process of trying to get back. And just some mornings I wake up, and it takes me a little while to get up level, stand straight, and get moving. I'm so stiff. I can't believe how stiff I am. And
yeah, what set this off, John? Was it a single incident on your back, or is it accumulative?
What set it off is actually a lady hit me in a car. She hit me head on. She was overtaking a lorry on the way to work. She was late for work, and she was overtaking, and she hit me. Like, she was never going to get past this lorry. And like, the lorry's coming, and I'm there. She's overtaking. Nowhere to go.
Wow.
So I swerved, but she swerved and she hit me. And put it this way, she hit me that hard. She knocked the back axle off my car. She hit me that hard and just spun me down an embankment. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I'd be all right if I got all these injuries through fighting, because I've had 40 pro fights. I wouldn't mind. Like, but got took out by a lady who was late for work. So,
I take it she survived the incident as well, right?
Yeah, she was fine. Like, a cow was messed up, like, but she was fine, and she was just shouting, "I'm sorry, I was late for work. I'm sorry." I was like,
"Wow."
Yeah, and all for being 5 minutes late for work.
Yeah, just never can tell, can you?
Yeah, and I was screaming at her, like, I was at the bottom of this embankment, my wheels missing, the cow was just revving. And I'm like shouting out the window to her. I said, you can imagine what I was shouting to her. She loads of witnesses, because loads of cars behind me, the lorry driver, loads of people, like, and she said, yeah, I was just late for work and trying to get
unbelievable. That's crazy. That is really crazy.
It was crazy.
But I suppose, like, in some ways, you've got to be grateful that it wasn't more serious as well. Like a head-on collision, you know, can be fatal in more often than not. So I guess if you're looking for positives, I suppose.
It's not positive, but like, that's what my mother said. She said it was a blessing in disguise, you know, because my mother's pretty religious. She said someone was watching over me, and plus the other lady never even had a mark on her. Like I said, she got nothing. Yeah, and that's all that happened to me. Is like, oh, my back's a bit sore, a bit like, and I thought, and they just said, and when they took me away in the ambulance, they said, yeah, a bit of stiffness there, it looks tight. it'll pass, and they just say it's like sciatica, it'll pass, and of course 6 months, 8 months, waiting for a scan, and I think it was 9 or 10 months before I even got, just because I went private in the end, because there was the emergency. They said they finally got me on an emergency list after about 8, 9 months. I went, oh, great news, great. I said, when? Oh, they went in 3 months' time. I was like, I'm not waiting another 3 months. I can't. I'm in too much pain now. I'm crying in pain now. So I paid private and got it the next day. I wish I would have done it 6 months beforehand. But of course, you wait, don't you? Just wait for the NHS and your GP and that. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, so often, it's not that I know wealthy friends or anything like that, but so many people are having things done privately these days. So many people, I'm hearing about it all the time. Not to say the NHS don't do a good job. I'm sure in many aspects they do. I had to go through the NHS to have my cancer surgery, so I'm thankful for that. But there are some issues and there are some shortcomings, and it was all aspirated by obviously the situation we had with this COVID. I think it's just made issues that much more worse, and it's awful what's going on where people are having to go private. I mean, there's many people that perhaps in a situation where that's not even an option.
Yeah, because it's not cheap. Just a scan is like from £500 to £700 or £800, and just for a scan, just to get in the next day, like. And then what the operation costs and things like it's insane. People can't afford it. And there's people worse off than me. That's what I mean. Worse off, who maybe need to get seen sooner, and for any long like cancer patients that need to get in and get seen. And it's just been so bad. Like I've been with my GP 20 odd year. They've not seen me before the operation because like I said, I went done in private. Couldn't even get to see my GP, or even after my operation. And when I ring up now, I need my muscle relaxers to ease me off a bit. They don't even ask any questions. I've not even seen them. Just here's your pills. All they do is just give me pills. Don't even have to. Don't even know if I need them. So if I was a druggie or something, they wouldn't even know because they say, "Here's your pills. Here's your pills. Take your pills." So they've not even seen me.
Yeah.
I've been with them 20 years. That's what's annoying.
Shocking.
If you think, I've been taking oxycodone now since 2008 every single day, because without it I can't get out of bed. But they give me like I got the short release, the slow release ones, which I take in the morning and take at the night, but they also give you like the fast release ones, which are obviously particularly addictive because there is an instant thing. And like I've had to use other products to really kind of get off those, because if I didn't, I'm still in so much pain that my body's already addicted to those drugs. But because they're legal, that's okay. But it's not because I've abused them or I've taken more than the prescription, but they just dole them out and they dole them out and they dole them out. So like if I'm late taking my medication or my dosage, I will get exactly the same symptoms as someone who's addicted to like heroin or all these different things, because my body is addicted to having those drugs in my system.
Used to.
And I get frustrated with it because I would like to not have to, apart from the fact I'd like to get off them, the second part of it is I know that taking that strong a medication for over 10 years is not good for you. It's not good for your mind. And I feel like sometimes they just dole out those tablets and stuff rather than perhaps deal with the problem. But there we go.
That's what I totally agree with. But again, they've not seen me, not even seen me since my ops and everything. And it's a family doctor. Like I said, been with them years since I was a teenager. Been with them over 20 years, and just annoying. Again, so
there's no wonder, is it, that the conspiracy theories about the pharmaceutical industry are alive and well when you've got situations like this. That seems to be the master plaster for anything that's wrong with anyone. It's just to dish out some form of medication.
Well, that's what I mean, before the op, because they won't let me in. Like that's all they're doing, just ring up. Oh, we'll give you it sounds like sciatica, which it was, of course. It's a trap disc and the bulgings. That's what it is. But it'll eventually go, and it was giving me codeine and some other relaxers, and they give me that many different pills. I didn't know, but it was that bad, bulging that bad with 2 discs. The pills wasn't even working, and codeine. And I don't know if you've ever taken codeine. not good for you. Like it was
Yeah.
bunging me
horrible.
up, making me even worse. I stopped taking it.
Yeah. I was at one point I was drinking. I was taking what's it called, tramadol, like right at the start, and that like is the most horrible medication. Like it made my mental health went down the tube in about 3 weeks because it was so the dreams, the way it makes you feel, it was horrible, and I just am very surprised how they just dole it out like without. And if you go there, like say you went to the doctors and said, I'm feeling really down or I'm struggling a bit because of my pain in my back and that, all they would do is they'd give you antidepressants.
Of course.
They wouldn't try and get to the root of why you're feeling down or your anxiety or whatever it may be. It's always, just take these. So you just end up with like a long list of tablets. And it's easy to see now why more and more people are turning to things like CBD products and CBD oils and things like that, because you're not having the psychological effects, the addictive effects. Particularly fighters, like how many fighters do you see around the world who are kind of talking about the effects of like CBD products and how much is helping them recover from fights? It's insane. I didn't expect to be talking about this, but there we go. Pharmaceutical companies. Right, John. Obviously, you've been in the fight game for a long time.
Been around.
Tell us a bit about how you got into it. First, how old were you? How did you come around to getting into it? What was the initial experience like?
Well, I was with it's a funny story. I'd been watching it, of course, from when it happened, started. Nice, I'd seen some tapes, and then early 2000s, I was watching it. And I happened to just be on a night out with a friend in Kettering, Northamptonshire, because I used to live in a place called Desborough. And I was on an island. I seen a poster for Kettering shoot fighters, and this was 2005. And I went, "Oh, shoot fighting. That's Ken Shamrock does that." I knew Ken Shamrock. I thought I've got to go along and try it. So I went along to a class, and then I started. That's how it started. I fell in love with the jiu-jitsu and the aspect, and then I went from there because they wasn't a fight gym. But get this, also I'm a fat guy at the time. I like my kebabs and pop. I was like I've got some pictures on my Instagram where I'm looking pretty chubs. And I thought, I could do this, eating a kebab. And then I moved to another gym where there was fighters, and it was run by a guy called Rob Olivier, who Danny will know. And then, of course, I got in with him, and he had a good team there, Tsunami Gym. And he took me under his wing, and then it started from there. And this is 2006-ish.
Okay.
My introduction.
I like it. Yeah, so that's interesting because I guess I don't know why, but for some reason I was expecting you to sort of maybe say like boxing or something like that, but jiu-jitsu was more of your entry into it. Were you instantly good at it? Or did it take you a lot of work to were you naturally talented, I guess, is the question? Or was it a bit more hard work?
No, I think I was always pretty talented because, again, coming from a gypsy background, I was brought up around fighting. Like, there's always fighting, but bare knuckle, this and that, boxing. But like I said, I was watching the Ultimate Fighter but early and stuff, and I like the ground stuff and the wrestling, and it's everything complete. And Robbie, Olivier, when I started training with him he said I could pick things up. He called me a sponge because I just kept picking things up so easy, like the groundwork and the wrestling, because I got into it and I really prided myself on the wrestling aspect, and then the jiu-jitsu and that come after, and then the boxing, of course. I'd already done bits of striking, but I fell in love with the wrestling and the groundwork more than anything. I just enjoyed it. And still to this day, I enjoy it. And I don't know how much I missed it till I was being on my back for like 15 months, not doing it, just dreaming about it. And that's how much I've missed it, and just can't wait to get back going. Because I'll always do it now. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a thing. It's a lifestyle, and it's my church stress releases there, being in the gym and doing jiu-jitsu. So can't wait to get back on the mats fully and just choke someone unconscious.
Because I'd say, because Tsunami Gym, they got really well known, or at least it seemed to me, for the wrestling. You know, there were people who would press you up against the cage and keep pinching round after round off you. And stylistically, it seemed that, you know, the reason why submissions and ground and pound was being won by this, because you literally wrestled the fight out of guys. I'd say, you know, Robbie was the big flyer of the flag in the early days of that style.
100%.
I think he largely become known as someone very, very difficult to beat, because, you know, if you let the rounds go by, you're predominantly losing the rounds to a takedown. I would say, you know, Tsunami was ahead of the game regards to wrestling aspects against the cage, which I think even to this day, I think there's some evolutionary process, you know, being obtained and being created at the minute against the cage. But yeah, Tsunami, I would say, is the first UK-based cage wrestlers, if you will.
Yeah, that's what we pride ourselves on, especially on the cage. Definitely, Robbie was there, and then we had a guy like Pierre there. Pierre was a veteran, been around, and we had other people. And then, of course, Jack Mason come in, Luke Bann, all these, we all come in, trained together. And my brother and a guy called Chris Allen and Matt, they was all judo based, like Robbie and that, like that. And then, but we just started building with the wrestling. And yeah, and we pride ourselves on the wrestling, pinning them, takedowns, just making it like, you know, as if you're pinned against that cage. It's just, even now, if you're pinned, it's just a horrible night if you're pinned and don't know how to get up. And even now, I watch a lot of fights now, still involved and still watch a lot of fights. And I still say now, UK still lacks a lot of the cage wrestling and control. Yeah. Because I scream at the telly when I see, watch them doing the wrestling, the cage things. I'm like, no. So much wrong.
Danny, you know, when you said Tsunami was kind of almost like bucking the trend in the UK in terms of how they approach things. So with that being more back in the day, where was it everyone was more focused on certain aspects, whether it be striking and stuff like that, or was it more back at times where fighters would be very one-dimensional, so they'd be either a striker or a wrestler or a grappler or whatever it would be? Like, what made Tsunami different, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, for many of the clubs back in the early days was that we couldn't really improve our cage skills because no one had a cage to train in. You know, a lot of the times it was done in a sports gym with no walls even to practice against. I think the first evolution was having a padded wall. That was how I got my cage wrestling, you know, was where it started to evolve in any kind of degree. I was never a good wrestler throughout all of my career, I'd suggest, but it's something that I obsess about now. I'm really fascinated with the cage wrestling aspects, but, you know, I kind of treat my gym as a laboratory of experimentation because there isn't really any instructions out there. I think it's a common sense approach and logical approach to, you know, fathoming out what works, what don't work. And I think you've largely got to be creative when you're in this sport of MMA still. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that what's being done is the only thing that can be done. I think you can always create. But yeah, I just think Tsunami, I went training down there just once or twice and they had a really good setup. You know, they had padded walls, they had a cage. I think you had a system, didn't you, where you had a half cage and it was on a hinge or something.
That's it, yeah. We could pull
that's right, yeah.
Work cage
yeah.
Work.
And this put them ahead, you know, but, you know, it takes intelligence as well. You know, so they've got this gym that allowed them to be able to work in the areas that needed to be worked, where so many other gyms weren't able to work in. But having it, you've got to still utilize it to the max. And Tsunami were the first gym that were doing that. And I think I probably would say that the peak of Robbie's career was when he fought Lee Remedios. I think that was when people, you know, sat up and realized, wow, you know, there's something about this Tsunami gym. And Robbie Olivier was largely flying the flag at that time. You know, because Lee Remedios, as you know, he went on and he had experiences in UFC and was considered a good wrestler, a very, very physical individual. But Robbie really, well, he just manhandled him, absolutely manhandled him, or technically handled him. Because, like I say, Lee was a physical dude back then. You know, it's still very much showing good shape. But Robbie Olivier's timing on the shoot, his cage press was just ahead of its time at the time. And Lee Remedios didn't look very good that night, but it wasn't because he was performing bad. It's because Robbie was performing so good.
Yeah, because I remember that fight and all. Robbie dropped him with a big overhand and broke his nose.
That's it.
Yeah,
yeah, because I think again, because we all knew the Tsunami as a wrestlers. Yeah, but a lot of the things that come with cage wrestling is you predominantly use your hands to get the entry.
Yeah,
and if you fail the entry, you hit off the breakers also. So you hit on the way in, you can hit on the way out, and suddenly someone that could perhaps be a better striker than Robbie. Suddenly, Robbie could be the better striker because he could strike into a clincher. There was no counter return. So suddenly, Robbie's boxing was looking really, really good. And I'm sure with some of the guys that he fought against, if it was just a boxing match, he wouldn't fare so well.
Yeah.
But the fact that he knew how to use his hands in a way that they couldn't counter return was making him look a better striker. And I think Tsunami was flying the flag of new ideas, and that idea was tactics and strategy. And if you can control the wrestling aspect, you can control where that fight goes, whether it's somewhere you need to steer it to make the opponent weak, or whether it's where an opponent's trying to put you where they're strong and you can avoid that situation. Controlling that wrestling is hugely tactical.
Agree. And it showed that again when he fought Brad Pickett for the second time, who was a high level, and he manhandled Brad, and we know Brad well, good friends with Brad now. He manhandled it and then choked Brad out in the second, I think it was the second in the second fight, but was never in the fight. Was never in it. And Brad's a better striker. Brad went on to be a phenomenal wrestler himself. Look at his cage wrestling. When he beat Demetrius Johnson and that, he used his wrestling. Amazing. That's what I mean. And again, but Robbie set the blueprint for a lot of this, and for myself and other guys, and we've all followed. Definitely, wrestling's still. If you look at MMA now, wrestling's still a big part of it. One of the biggest aspects I find, and the hard. Still, a lot of people shy away because it's hard. It's hard to train, hard work.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, Dan. That's why, particularly in his early UFC fights, that's why Jack Shaw caught the attention of the American and the Canadian commentators, was because they couldn't believe that a UK guy was able to manhandle his opponents from other countries. I think that he fought a guy from Eastern Europe as well, and an American guy as well. Like in the wrestling, they couldn't quite get their head around a UK guy being able to do that, because it's fairly unusual, I guess. But I think if you look at the champions in the UFC now, the ones who look almost like unbeatable, if you like, at the moment, people like Usman, their wrestling is like out of this world. Like
wrestling background.
Khabib obviously is recently retired as undefeated champion, and there's a few other guys. So it's clearly, even though now is so much all round, you've got to be good at everything, wrestling still has a big say in who gets to the top. John, when you look back on your career, or not that it's over and stuff like that, but I mean, like when you look back now over your time in the fight game, who do you think has had the most influence on you, whether it be in or out the cage?
Well, it had to be Rob Olivier, because like I said, he was fighting early 2000s, I think. And when I got with him, he totally changed my mind on things and everything. And so it started with him being an original coach. So definitely, it was he was the influence for sure. And it went on there. And of course, I met many people afterwards and good friends. I've made a lot of good friends in sports. And like my brother's always been he was a fighter, fought a good record. Tommy beat a lot of high level guys. And then Jack Mason and Luke Barnett, we had our clique, and we all pushed each other. That's the guys who I had around me, and we pushed each other. So Jack, who was the biggest welterweight going. He was massive, Jack Mason. Then he had Luke, 6'6", who was a middleweight, light heavyweight, and then he got my brother, who was a straight up killer and all. So it was my original team who influenced me, pushing each other.
Yeah. Do you know, you just reminded me of a question which someone asked me to ask Danny this week, but I'll put it to both of you. So I'll ask you first, Dan. Who, when you look back now from today, back to when you started in the fight game, is there one name or maybe a couple of names who you look back on and you think if they had been around, like in today's day where the sport is bigger, they would have gone on and done some really special things, maybe suffered because the sport wasn't as popular or as big as it was back in the day? maybe they're supremely talented, didn't get the attention they deserved, or whatever it may be. Underrated, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer because it's one of these ones that you can ask me this question in a year's time. I might say someone else. But standouts for me, in terms of if they were young and athletic in the versions they were then, with the training that's available to them today, I still think people like Marco Ruiz would still be someone that would make an impact today. I'm going back to someone now that made impacts in the 1990s.
Okay.
He was someone that I would say was one of the very first fighters that could kind of do a bit of everything. Was a notable striker, could wrestle some and had some great jiu-jitsu skills. Or his style was luta livre, which is basically jiu-jitsu without the uniform on, which is another Brazilian grappling art. I mean, you could pick so many guys out from the past that could have, made an impact today, I suppose. But that's someone that I really admired back when I was kind of just getting interested in the sport before I actually even started training it. He was someone that I was watching on videotapes, as it was back then, giving away my age here a little bit. I used to love watching this guy fight. Scary dude back in his day. Apparently, some people still go and train with him today, and he's still in extremely good shape and an absolute handful to deal with.
Interesting. John, is there anyone where you look back and you think like they were the real deal and perhaps didn't get the attention or the luck? Or
I think, like I said, going back again to Robbie, I was just my original coach. I said he was early 2000. He was a specimen. He had everything. It was the sport wasn't where it was at when he was like number one in Europe. And Daniel said he got to number one. He beat everyone. They even flew which he lost to the leg lock guy that flew into fighting, didn't they? Can you remember, Dan? I don't know what's it. Imanari.
Yeah.
They flew him that and I think with today's training and everything now, like I said, he was a family man, fireman, trying to train for fights by balancing all this out, as a lot of fighters still do now. But he had so much going on, and then running gyms and coaching us. Like I said, it was just a shame that he was just a bit too late for him to have a shot, because again he had all the aspects. He had everything and all.
Yeah, I was kind of sad that he never made it to UFC. So I had my last fight in 2010, and they brought the featherweight division into UFC in 2010. Yeah. But I was already 37, 38 at the time, so kind of my time was coming to an end anyways there. But I do agree that Robbie never got to showcase on the world stage his level. He did it domestically and had people flowing in. He was doing all that world-class performance, over this side of the water and not the other side of the water, unfortunately. But I do think he could have made an impact had he gone that way. But it just wasn't to be for him. Yeah. And I think he's quite a quiet-spoken guy. He's not someone to write loads on the internet. He's quite a reserved character. So a lot of people in this era perhaps wouldn't even know who he is. But I guarantee if you look back at his fights, you would see a modern game being done against not so modern people, if you know what I mean. He's definitely went under the radar. We all knew how good he was. I experienced fighting the guy, and lucky for me, I was fighting at a time in the very early fights that if you didn't submit or knock him out, you got a draw. So that was fortunate for me. But but even back then, we were both fighting at lightweight because there was no other division. I was ever so small at that weight back in the early days. I was 64 kilos. Fighting guys cutting from 75 down 70. It was not a pleasurable experience the first few years of the fight career. But we got over it and we still did good things. But I couldn't agree more. I would say Robbie's largely probably the most underrated fighter from that era. Who never perhaps got the exposure.
Brad Pickett out. And
Lee Remedios and all these characters that he beat. Who else did he used to have those wars with? The guy from was it Bristol way, Gloucestershire way, something like that. Ronnie Mann. Ronnie Mann had a fantastic career. Perhaps someone else that perhaps should have had a bigger career than he actually did. I think he retired fairly young. Yeah. I think he's become a family man. But he was talking about people that perhaps could have done more than than he actually did. I think Ronnie Mann was one of those. Fantastic striker, great jiu-jitsu. But Robbie had wars with him, didn't he? But again, smothered him with the wrestling. And that Ronnie Mann was a scary prospect because he was a world-class K1 guy. He had the backing by his dad. I think his dad was a fairly well-off kind of character, really helped his training line. In fact, my brother was training with this Ronnie Mann. So I was kind of getting whispers of how good this kid was. And I went down and I missed out on training with him, unfortunately, but I got training with some of his coaches there. And they were really saying this kid's something special. But yeah, and again, Robbie stifled this guy. I mean, he just couldn't get anything off. Every time he twitched his hip to throw a kick, Robbie was shooting in and taking him down. Incredible performance.
Interesting.
Great. Like I said, a really good kid. Yeah, he was. I remember. Like I said, he was fighting before me, but I said he was a Ronnie Mann.
Ashley Grimshaw. Did Robbie fight Ashley Grimshaw? I think he did, didn't he?
He did. I think he beat Robbie. I think he beat Grimshaw. And I said he beat Ronnie.
Yeah, Grimshaw was another real good fighter back in the day.
Only just retired, any Grimshaw and all, not long.
That's right. Yeah. I saw him when I took Jordan down to train at Brad's to do some sparring with Nathaniel Wood. I saw him there, and I said, "Hey, you got anything coming up?" He goes, "I've hung my gloves up. It's time to stop it." He just said, "I'm too old for it." I think he's sitting around about your age. I think he's about 37, 38.
Nah, he's actually 40 odd. He's 40.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Okay. He looks. I tell you what, he looks good for his age.
He's always looked like a kid, hasn't he? But I saw him at the YouTube boxing thing I went to when I took Jay Cuccinelli a while ago, and I think he's 40 odd. He always had a couple of years on me. So yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
I said to him, "You look well."
Yeah, he is 40. Yeah. I've just got it up here. Yeah, he is. He's turned 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks really, really well.
Yeah. I said that to him. I did say he looks good.
Yeah. Good head of hair as well. He's still got long hair and none of it's grey. Yeah. So jealous.
Right, and that's the problem. I've got loads of grey hair.
I have too. You just can't see it. It all fell out.
John, have you ever fought anyone you sincerely dislike?
Oh, I've had a lot of fights. I'm trying to think. No, I don't. They might have disliked me. I wasn't very liked by a lot of people because I kept beating them. But I was known as I was funny at the way and this and that, and so people probably didn't like me. But me fighting, I didn't have to get up for a fight, be mad, angry, or I was just being me. Same now as nothing. I remember one of my favourite moments was fighting a guy called Chris Rice, who's a veteran. I don't know. Do you remember Chris Rice? Danny Batten, he was a middleweight.
It rings a bell. Yeah, it rings a bell.
I think he finished with a 19-5 record or something like that.
Right.
A big red Chris Rice. He's well known at the time. He was a middleweight, and I was fighting at middleweight. Me, who's fought at lightweight, fighting at middleweight. Because, again, didn't know now about cutting weight. I'm a fat guy fighting at middleweight, and I ended up going I think 8 and 9-0 as a middleweight. That's to show you just purely on wrestling, taking them down and subbing them. That's all I would do. Anyway, but Chris, I remember one of me, I was weighing in, but just before the weigh-ins, we're checking gloves. As you do, you give your gloves, check them, stretch them. But he starts slapping me around the face with the gloves. Before the weigh-in, he goes, "Yeah, these'll do. These'll do for us beating you later." And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll see." But it's all fun for me. I always fun. Some guys got a bit pissed off and got to fire themselves up to fighting. But I've always said, if you need to be fired right up to get yourself in the zone, then maybe fighting's not for you anyway.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I can get out of bed now and go and fight someone if I needed to. That might just be my thinking, but I could just walk out the door and fight. If he wants to fight outside, does he? I said, well, on the Gypsy site, sometimes that's got to happen. But yeah, I'll go out.
Interesting. So I'm interested by that because you see some fighters, they almost have to get into their mode of being, they don't like their opponent, they're going to war, etc., etc. And then other fighters are quite happy to just keep it as a kind of respectful and sport and enjoy the experience. I was just kind of interested in where you stood on it, because sometimes I think, if fighters need that motivation or that extra little bit of needle to help get them in the right frame of mind, I don't really have a problem with it.
No.
But I think some seem to need it more than others. So we had a question sent in by I'm gonna actually absolutely butcher this poor man's name now. Ugar will say, and he says he sent in a couple of questions. So the first question was, if Fedor had come to the UFC in 2009, 2010, so the era of Shane Carwin, Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez, and Lesnar, etc., could he have been a champion like the other fighters were, and like he dominated elsewhere? Danny, you can take that one, I think, and then I'll put the next one to John.
Yeah, I think you could never write someone like Fedor off. I mean, he's still kind of a bit of someone now, isn't he?
He's still going, isn't he?
He's had very few losses. Look, I've met this guy a few times. He ain't even a big guy. And it's not even a big guy. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, John, you say about it, you're sort of like a fat, small guy fighting at middle. This guy ain't big.
No.
And he's fighting monsters. And have a look at his fight record. You know, he doesn't lose often, this guy. Even though he's fighting now in his 40s. I have no doubt he could have been making impacts during any era, to be honest.
He's quite scary dude as well. Like I think when you look at who was it? I can't remember.
He's emotionless, isn't he? He doesn't show no emotion. But you know, in person, he's a bit of a joker. When I met him, he was prattling about all the time with Randy Couture, creeping up behind him, sticking sticky labels on him, and he was a complete comedian and had time for everyone. I have met some people that were really reluctant to have. You seem to be irritating them. You know, really reluctant to have the picture taken with you and so on and so forth. They really didn't seem to have time, but didn't get no sense of that with someone like Fedor. Really good character, good man. And I think he's quite a religious guy, and he's definitely of good character. He's just an absolute warrior. He's a warrior. He doesn't seem to suffer fear like so many of us do. It's something different. You do get these odd, I don't know whether you want to say they're psychos. I think that's probably the wrong word to try and express what I'm trying to say. But you do get people that they just don't get wound up. They just don't seem to get nervous, but they can just trigger and go and fight like they're a crazed animal, even though he still never expressed no emotion. When he was attacking someone or being attacked, he showed no emotion. Look, how about when Rounderman suplexed him on his head? Was it Rounderman?
Yeah, Kevin
Rounderman. It was, wasn't it? Yeah. In like a full Nelson. I mean, it was sick what I saw. And he had no emotion, got up from it, and then in very quick order, dusted him up. It was just like incredible.
Like he got out of bed. Just like he got out of bed, wasn't it?
Yeah. He doesn't even celebrate wins big. He'll put his arm up at most. Yeah. It's not someone that goes running around getting overexcited. It's like, well, I expected to win. Mm-hmm. But he's even ingracious in defeat as well.
Yes. Yes, he is.
Yeah, a very good human being.
Yeah, I was going to say he's. I'm sure he was in the army or something like that, and but he was like in some sort of highly elite part of the army. But I think I might be getting him confused with someone else. So I'm gonna Pro Cop. That's the one.
Another stone face killer.
Yeah, absolutely stone face. I love watching him fight back in the day.
Yeah.
So the other question we had sent in, John, and I'll put this one to you. It says, do you think that if Brock Lesnar had gone into MMA straight from his college wrestling, as opposed to going to the WWE and for, kind of going that route and then going into the UFC, so he had come up straight into the MMA under elite camps and coaches right after college, do you think that he would have dominated that heavyweight division over the years? Because obviously he was relatively impressive in his short stints in the UFC, or do you feel that he kind of achieved what he was going to achieve regardless?
No, I think he could have done. I think Brock Lesnar's just a freaking athlete. Who else can go from college wrestling, professional wrestling, win the world UFC title, which many people won't do, and then back to wrestling, plus American football he played. He was a freak specimen. And of course, there's the other thing about what he's on and what he takes, because he's big naturally. But yeah, I think if he went straight MMA and had good camp and the training we had nowadays, he could be heavyweight champion. Remember, Division 1 all wrestler. So, and like he could go from here to there in seconds, like explosive for a big man.
He reminds me of like Tyson Fury in that he's someone that big shouldn't be moving that quick.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't kind of add up. Like it doesn't total up, does it, in your brain as you're watching these guys? For me, like Brock Lesnar, like he did some incredible things. The way he came in and even after he'd lost that the one fight and came back about a year later and then got the title, and the way he did it, he did, and the way he conducts himself as well. He doesn't really give a shit, and he kind of like does things his own way. It's part of the appeal, but I don't know. It's a very certain kind of like what if question, I guess, isn't it, Danny? I think
he could have.
Go on, John.
I think he could have. Yeah, like I said, he beat Frank Mir like in the rematch. Mir beat the first time when he had the rematch for Frank Mir. Frank Mir is no slouch. He was UFC champion, beat a lot of good guys and that. He smashed Frank Mir in the second fight. Smash it. And on his fifth fight, maybe? Brock Lesnar's fifth fight? I can't remember. Didn't have a lot of fights, did he?
No, he only had 8 in total, and I think it was his 4th or his 5th fight, wasn't it, where he went for the...
Yeah, and Heath Herring, who had Heath Herring, if you remember, Heath Herring, Pride guy, fought everybody and had 30-odd fights. He beat him in the UFC. Yeah, he's like you said, he beat some guys. I said, I've got people hated on it when he come in, but I had respect for him for what he did. He didn't have to do it. It wasn't for money, was it? It was like he just wanted. He said he could be champion, and he beat one of the all-time greats in Randy Couture. Whatever you say about Randy, Randy's one of the best to ever do it. Again, if Randy was in the era we're in now, in his prime, look at Randy could beat most guys now. I truly believe that. Me and my brother was talking.
I agree.
A few days ago about Randy. In his prime, in today's era, there won't be many guys who can beat Randy because he was too, like, game plans, conditioning, everything was on point with Randy. Even back then, in his 40s, he was still whooping guys, like, who was at top of the food chain. I think he would have been the man still.
It's fascinating.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So, John, we're going to let you go there, mate. Honestly, that 47 minutes has flown by. Absolutely flown by.
That's probably the quickest 47 minutes.
That's probably
it's unbelievable. But Ben is patiently waiting in the wings. John, you are absolutely most welcome, mate, to come back anytime, and we'll continue.
I feel that there's so much not been said, so you definitely have to get you back, John.
Going all day. I'll come back anytime you want to chat.
That'll be good.
Mate. Yeah. Appreciate your time, John. Thank you very much, mate.
Good luck with your recovery, John, and I'll see you on the circuit. Cheers, buddy.
Take care. Right. Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
And just like that, one guest leaves, another joins us. Welcome this evening to Mr. Ben Doherty, author, boxing pundit, and trainer. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, guys. How's it going?
You're right, Ben.
All good, mate. All good. It's been an interesting weekend. Obviously, we, as I said to you yesterday, I think it was yesterday, we had Jake Paul versus Eddie Hearn. It felt very much like that in the run-up to the fight. However, when the fight came, it didn't disappoint, I got to say.
No, it didn't. It was, it was a great fight. I mean, it was high energy, high octane fight. 2 elite competitors. Controversial decision, at least a decision which has engendered a lot of debates and a lot of people arguing the toss on both sides. But yeah, it was a great fight, and I think Katie Taylor, who got the decision, is a great champion. She's got that X factor. I mean, she can come through those tough moments that she experienced in the 5th and the 6th round. I mean, she's got the heart of a lion, hasn't she? Or a lioness, if you want to put the gender context on it. It was a great fight. And I think it was a breakthrough I'm happy to look at it simply as boxing, as it's been suggested that we, of course, should. But in terms of a breakthrough for female boxing, it was, a historical event of the first female headliner at Madison Square Garden. Amanda Serrano, who probably thought she deserved the decision, probably felt that she won, was very kind of classy in proclaiming the greater good at the end when she said women can sell, women can fight, and we put on a hell of a show. And she just seemed to bask in the glory of it all, even though it wasn't her night,
Well, in fairness, I think she knows there's a rematch coming in Ireland, probably, which is going to, be equally as big. Look, to me, like you said there, you're happy to view it as just boxing, and that's what people would prefer to do. But also, I think there's nothing wrong with saying, look, this was a landmark event fight for women's boxing. This put women's boxing on the next level. They main evented Madison Square Garden. They sold it out. And not only that, they produced the goods in terms of the quality of the fight. It wasn't, disappointment. It wasn't, terribly bad technically or something like that. All the things that have been thrown at women's boxing over the years. Like, it was a good event, and it was deserving of its main event slot, etc., etc. I didn't think, like Gaz has just said there, that he didn't think it was massively controversial result. I thought Katie Taylor won marginally. The only thing I found a little bit controversial was the gap in the scorecards. Yeah. I think it was the two which went with Katie Taylor.
I've got two things to say on that. One is that sometimes wide margins can be misleading because most people tend to watch a fight and they don't score it. And, most people don't know really how to score a fight. So they'll watch what is a bitterly contested fight where every round is close as hell, and they will see a margin of 3 or 4 points on a scorecard, and they'll be like, no, I don't know what fight they were watching. But I'll give you an example. If me and Danny, for instance, were to do 10 100-meter sprints and he beat me by a quarter of a second every time, he's beat me 10-0, hasn't he? Even if it's incredibly close every race. And that's the thing. Sometimes you can have bitterly contested rounds, but if one judge is seeing the majority of them for a certain fighter, then you can sometimes get a competitive fight which looks uncompetitive on the scorecard. There's even bigger examples of that over time. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think we don't interpret the 10-point must system intelligently enough in boxing. I think there's too much knee-jerking when you see, like a knockdown means it's a 10-8 round and 2 knockdowns means it's a 10-7, when, sometimes no 2 knockdowns are alike. And I think you also need to take into account what's happening in a round. Talking about the event of knockdowns, which obviously we didn't see last night, but suppose I'm beating you from pillar to post for one round, and then you put me down right on the bell. It's very debatable that you should get a 10-8 round just because you scored the knockdown. So here's another thing: when Serrano had Katie in a lot of trouble in the 5th round and pretty much battered her from pillar to post, there is a definite argument saying that Serrano should have got a 10-8 round for that. Somebody tells me, I haven't looked at the scorecards, I haven't scrutinised them. Somebody suggested to me that she got a 10-8 on at least one of the judges' cards, but suppose she'd have got it across the board. What we don't do in the 10-point must system is we don't delineate between a close round where I've just pipped you or a round where you've been very dominant and knocked me all over the gaff without knocking me down. Do you know what I mean? So that is another factor why you might get the margins that you get, because people were saying Serrano won her rounds big, but Katie won more rounds, but more quietly, or she won closer rounds. So that might have some bearing on it. I've seen the punch stats, which they should never be looked upon as a holy grail, by the way, because they're anonymously compiled and they don't allow for the round segments either. They literally look at the aggregate through the entire fight. But the punch stats, I believe, were clearly in favour of Serrano, that she landed more punches. But it's not quite that simple.
Yeah, of course it's not. It doesn't. Like I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything, but it can mean nothing, can't it, really?
Well, it means quite a lot, but the thing is, the only thing it doesn't account for, she had a really big 5th round, so she threw so many punches in that round, and she landed a lot of punches, which put her aggregate way up, but it's still only one round, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's funny, because usually you say, when you look at the scoring criteria in boxing, I tend to hark back to, it's about outlanding your opponent, and it's about landing more clean scoring punches than they do. But as we've just explored in this discussion, it's not just about that, because you have to win the rounds, and the rounds are segmented for a reason. In the Olympics, for many years, when they installed the computer from 1992 onwards in Barcelona, suddenly it wasn't about winning rounds anymore. It was simply about landing more punches, and the only benefit of a round was literally to get your breather in that minute break, because they weren't scoring rounds. That you must have seen it yourselves when you watched the Olympics in the last few Olympics, not so recently, but going back to the early part of the 20th century. You remember you'd see the scores on the screen and they would just keep going up throughout the fight, yes. Red and blue, and you'd be like, oh, can the Welsh girl win it? She's one behind, but she lands 3 punches and she's done it. That wasn't about rounds, because they decided they were going to go on the computer. But then obviously the powers that be, in their wisdom, perhaps being lobbied by various people, suddenly decided they didn't want to do that and they were going to go back to round scoring again. That's where we've been at in professional boxing for a very long time. It's not perfect, and I don't think it's always administered properly, the 10-point must. But I didn't score the fight last night. I watched it. I woke up about 5 a.m. this morning, or got woken up by my autistic son, as per on a Sunday, and I put DAZN on and I watched the fight, and I just watched it to enjoy it. And my impression was that Katie had deserved the decision, but I can't really say, to be honest with you, unless I watch it and score it.
Yeah, I thought it was close. I thought marginally, I think I went with Katie Taylor, but like you just said, I didn't sit there and score it, round for round. I kind of just went roughly with, I would have given that round to Taylor, etc. Eddie Hearn said afterwards that this was one of the best fights ever at Madison Square Garden. Being the historian that you are, I was interested in your take on that and if you put it up there.
Nah, it's steady on, Eddie. It was a great fight, but we see great fights all the time. Come on, Eddie, steady on. Just literally, you're talking about the whole history of Madison Square Garden. Does Eddie even know there have been 4 different locations for Madison Square Garden, but it still ultimately represents the same iconic brand? They had the one in 50th Street back in the day, where the likes of Tony Zale and Rocky Graciano fought, So, I mean, I wouldn't put it. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't put it probably in the top 50 or 100 fights I've ever seen, which is no disgrace or disrespect, because there's been so many great fights over the years, So to say it's one of the greatest fights ever at Madison Square Garden, no, but he's caught in the moment, isn't he? And he's making money, unlike me, so he's more likely to get excited. Put me on Eddie Hearn's wages, I might get all kind of guessed and start saying this is the greatest thing in the history of human endeavour. Not even boxing, just culture.
Yeah,
I probably would be. Give me $5,000, and I'll probably start getting it that excited.
But no. Look, I thought it was good. I thought it was pretty good. I'm interested that, and such is life with these big fights, is that almost the second they finish, you're talking about a rematch. And they were saying it seems to be Croke Park in Ireland is the venue. Look, that's going to be massive. Katie Taylor's huge in Ireland, of course. She's got a massive following. That will be a real super show. Do you think they load up that card, Ben? Because obviously one of the things we talked about last week with the Fury fight was that actually the undercard was probably a bit underwhelming, do we say? Yeah. Whereas, do you think if they're going to sell out Croke Park, I dare say they'd sell out anyway with Katie Taylor, but do you see them loading that up maybe with some British and Irish fighters? Well-known fighters.
I think they probably would, because let's remember it was Frank Warren who won the purse bids for Fury White, and he goes with his business, modus operandi. Although Frank Warren did used to promote some very stacked cards, but I think in recent years I don't think we expected him to do that on this occasion, because all the money had gone into securing the main event. I think Eddie and DAZN have shown that they are more willing to stack a card a little bit more generously, the undercard. They've got more fighters to put on it, let's be honest as well. So I would expect that, I know some people were saying, because of this, I don't want to get locked in this again, but because of this situation with MTK having recently folded, and you've got the Kinahan sanctions and updates on that seemingly every day almost, some people said that created a problem with boxing promotion in Ireland, and said there's not been any big shows in Ireland for a long time. And some people related it to that political situation that's been ongoing. So I think it would be, perhaps, if that's true, then it would be a breakthrough in that sense as well, wouldn't it? I think Katie definitely deserves to headline in her own country, where she's absolutely idolised, and I think it would be a great thing to see. The thing I liked as well, the 2 girls at the end, because Serrano wasn't bitching about the decision or anything like that. Yeah, and
I did like that. I did like that she took
lovely,
it well.
Classy lady. And when they said, how about a rematch? How do you girls feel about doing this again? And Katie, who was the sweetest girl in the world as well, just smiled and looked at her and said, "Let's do it again, Amanda." She was okay, and it was just, It's the same. It's exactly the same camaraderie I see between Ward and Getty. You know what I mean? Never mind the genders and male, female. There is a universal ingredient that's peculiar to fighters, and the respect that fighters garner for each other while they're trying to decapitate one another, and when they find they're extraordinarily well matched in that particular enterprise. You know, and it was beautiful.
Wasn't there? You mentioned the MTK thing. Ben, just quickly on that, I don't want to retread over what we talked about over the last couple of weeks. Wasn't there a fighter this week who was stopped from going to America because of that?
Matthew Macklin, former world-class middleweight, who was very unlucky on a couple of occasions not to win a world title, especially when he fought Felix Sturm in Germany. He also extended Sergio Martinez. He was one of them kind of nearly men. I mean, he got stopped by Golovkin fair and square, and he said that's the best guy I've ever been in with. But Macklin, a former world-class middleweight turned Sky pundit of many years, it was well documented. He was very friendly with Danny Kaye, and initially the gym in Marbella that MTK had was called MGM Marbella, but they had, because it was something like Macklin's Gym Marbella, MGM. Yeah. They ran into problems with MGM, the big famous MGM in Hollywood and Las Vegas. So they changed their name to MTK, which is Mac the Knife, which is another kind of theme on Macklin's kind of name. It's also got a bit of a gangster kind of feel to it, has it? We can't deny that. And so Macklin was obviously very well, well situated with the whole MTK brand, even though he has not had any official ties in it for quite a while, like everybody else. And he's been on Sky for a long time. But this time, because of the scrutiny and the heat being turned up by the US authorities, he wasn't going to New York, by the way, to cover the Taylor Serrano fight. He was hoping to go to work the Shakur Stevenson Oscar Valdez fight in Las Vegas. And they said, no, afraid not, mate. It's interesting, but some people are saying that other boxing figures, he was one of a number of boxing figures who were prevented from traveling. Now, some people are speculating on the grapevine, and my kind of inbox or text box has been alive with rumours this week about the other couple of people who weren't allowed to travel either. More in the media and such like, shall I say?
Yeah.
If what will be interesting is how much of an ongoing issue that is going to be, because if it's true about the guy who runs a very successful media platform, or heads up fronts a very successful media platform, he needs to go to the US ideally to do his work. He can still do big things in England and abroad, generally. But I'd imagine it'd be a bit of an annoyance to him if he has trouble travelling for a while because of this.
Absolutely.
Same thing goes for Macklin, with Sky Sports. Although he doesn't have to travel, they could send someone else to those gigs. But no question, Macklin was definitely stopped from going. And I think what it shows you is how serious the American government is about this clampdown. That they're not messing around.
Obviously, I don't want to name the person who you were alluding to there because I don't think it's fair to them to be.
No, I don't think it's fair.
But I do think if they've had a problem getting to the US, I think it's potentially problematic for them, isn't it? Because of the work they do and the situation, and really,
the only thing I would say,
massive fault of their own.
No, exactly, because the person. I don't think we should give too many clues either, because otherwise it's like we're saying it without saying it. The person in question is I've known him for years on the scene. Good guy, visionary guy, did very well, worked really hard to get where he is.
100%.
That's all I'm aware of, and I don't think there's any particular justification for him experiencing all those problems. Really, to be honest with you, I think all I would say is, having built something that big, you can always delegate. And still do well. I'd have thought. I wouldn't have thought that the thing itself is going anywhere, but it is interesting, isn't it? Because there was a lot of people. There was a lot of people on that MTK catalogue, and if things like this are going to continue to happen, then it's just interesting to see where it all ends, because I would never have believed things would move on as quickly as they have done in any case.
Yeah, no, it's been very quick. It's just kind of one of those things which doesn't seem to be ending in some ways. It just seems to be rolling on, and every day there seems to be another development, whether it's someone being stopped from traveling or something else. Just kind of finish us off, Ben. What boxing's coming up over the next couple of weeks?
Far be it for me to try and lead the show, but did you want to talk a little bit about Shakur Stevenson?
Yes.
Yeah. Just because Matthew Macklin didn't see it doesn't mean we can't talk about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Go on.
He probably listen. Matthew Macklin no doubt did see it. I'm sure he watched it on Sky. But yeah. So anyway, it was a unification fight between the WBO and the WBC super featherweight champion, and Shakur Stevenson greatly impressed, putting on a masterclass clinic. Pretty much won every round, and did a great job. Everybody's talking about him, saying he's one of the banner, future banner stars of the sport. And the evidence, he's only young. I think he's only 23, 24. And it was a fantastic performance. And he, Valdez is no mug, and he shut him out pretty much. Shut out being when you pretty much win all 12 rounds. So there's a lot of big fights there for. At super featherweight or certainly at lightweight. I mean, because he looked massive in the ring, by the way, Shakur Stevenson. He looked more like a welterweight in the ring. I'm sure Danny knows these days about people who do the weight cut, and they come in twice the size. 36 hours later, boxers at the highest levels very much tend to do that. And he looked huge, in the ring. But there's talk about him moving up to lightweight and fighting the likes of Campbell and stuff like that. So I think we should have high hopes for where Stevenson goes from here, and he's certainly Floyd Mayweather left a legacy, a technical legacy on boxing, as well as the business model that some people have looked to pursue in his wake. But Floyd Mayweather created a kind of generation. The elite Afro-American fighters have got some of his trappings. Guys like Devin Haney, I don't say as good as him, or Shakur Stevenson. That kind of surgical like precision and defensive prowess, and the ability to judge distance perfectly, and the accuracy to pick shots and to slow down the pace of a fight. Instead of like when Muhammad Ali might have created a bunch of guys dancing on their toes and being a bit flashy, and Sugar Ray Leonard no doubt spawned a lot of imitators, Floyd has created a different kind of blueprint for this era amongst some of the more elite, certainly Black American fighters, and you can see the imprint on them, and Shakur Stevenson is one of them.
Yeah, he certainly looks impressive for such a young guy, like 23, I think he is. I was just looking. Yeah. Obviously got a silver medal, didn't he, at the Olympics? Was it the Brazil Olympics? I think it was. I forget.
Rio,
yeah. He looks. I've only seen clips of that fight, but he just looked impressive. And like you say, Oscar Valdez is not he's not I don't like to use the word bum, but he's not he's not an average fighter, if you like.
Not at all. He's an elite fighter, yeah. I mean, a damn good fighter.
For him to produce a performance like that in a shutout is super impressive. Speaking of last night, one thing we didn't touch on was Liam Smith also fought on the British side of things. What did you think of his performance? He stopped Jesse Vargas. I think it was 9th or 10th round.
I've got to be honest, I didn't see it because I had the kids round last night. I don't tend to stay up for those shows because I know that Joseph's going to get up at stupid o'clock anyway. So I tend to catch up in the morning, and then I've obviously got them for the rest of the day till I drop them off. So I got up and I watched Katie Taylor on DAZN, and then I went to YouTube and I found Shakur Stevenson. So that's the fights that I've seen. Liam Smith, I'm up to speed with it, and I've heard people's breakdown of it. Liam Smith, he's not legitimately lost since 2018, really. Where he lost out in Russia, but very controversially a fight or so back. Before he beat Anthony Fowler, so last fight but one. He most people thought he got robbed out in Russia. He was impressive against Anthony Fowler in a kind of crossroads fight, a domestic fight. And then this also was seen as a bit of a crossroads fight with the loser having nowhere to go at world class. And, I think he's doing well, Beefy, quite quietly, and you'd think it would propel him towards something. And there's still a bit of mileage in his career, at the moment. So, from what I understand, it was a good, solid performance. He broke the guy down with pressure, intelligent pressure, and did his thing.
Yeah, that's the way to go. And I think they'd had a bit of a war of words, if you like, between the two of them. So that kind of puts that to an end. And obviously you mentioned the Fowler fight as well. So, yeah, he's kind of quietly gone about his business, really, haven't he? And
yeah.
I don't know what would be next for him. I was just trying to have a little look then. I'm sure that he'll have some sort of big fight coming up now because, like you say, really, apart from that fight he got robbed in, he hasn't lost.
He hasn't, and he's fought Canelo. Remember, which by way of a link for your look ahead before we close out to look ahead to what to what's coming up next weekend. You've got Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol, of course, up at light heavyweight, which is an interesting fight because he's a decent fighter, Bivol. So it's Saul Canelo Alvarez is in with a live world light heavyweight title holder. It's not impossible for Bivol to get his hand held up, or I would fancy Canelo, but it's a big fight for sure.
I think there's a super middleweight fight next week as well. Is that next week, or it might be the week after? I think later on in the month between Demetrius Andrade and
Zach Parker.
That's later in the month, isn't it?
A little bit later, yeah. So I mean, basically, all roads lead to Canelo next weekend. I mean, boxing does manage to produce something big every weekend, more or less. I think it's quite impressive in a way, the way we've still managed to churn that situation out. We've just had Fury and White. We've had KT Taylor and Serrano last night. Next weekend we've got Canelo. Boxing does have this way of producing a big event every week, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think it's looking good for May. A couple of good fights there, so I look forward to those. But we're going to kind of switch over towards the last night's UFC now, Ben. So we'll let you go.
Before we do, how I like to say,
Danny's going to
send it sideways. You said about Mayweather. You talk obviously I would argue one of the best defensive boxers that there's been. But I put you, arguably, whether you think you agree, someone that's possibly better. Is that Nicolino Loch? I might be saying his name.
Yeah, Loch. Yeah, Loch.
I watched back at some of his fights. I mean, is that a style that could even work in a modern era? But he was practically untouchable. It was incredible watching some of these boxing matches.
Yeah. And I think with him, it was all about the upper body. With Floyd, it was about where his hands were. I mean, Loche would do those blocks and shoulder rolls as well. He knew about that too. But I think so much of it was his upper body movement, his head movement. What I love about Loche is he looks like, just like some barrel-chested, balding Argentine brawler. He looks like he'd fight like most Argentinians, like Oscar Bonavena or Juan Roldan or something. And he's actually got these silky, amazing skills with that kind of swagger, that kind of nonchalant swagger that he had with it, where he could just, stand on a 20-pence piece and make you miss with 15 shots on the spin. But I don't think the reason I think Floyd was so good defensively, and I do think he might have been I did do a list once, the top 10 greatest defensive fighters of all time, arguably, where I broke it down and took 10 choices. And Mayweather topped the list on the occasion when I made it in 2018. And I don't think I've changed my mind since. The thing that made Floyd so good was he had that head movement and the ability to make people miss by moving his head. He had that guard position, with the shoulder here, the right hand there, and the kind of subtleties that it involved, which made him hard to hit in the head or the body. He also had the legs for it. He had the footwork, and he did have the head movement too. So I think the combination Mayweather mastered with, because your defense is based on those three things really. There's only three ways. I always say to any raw recruits, there's only three ways to defend a punch. I can either put something in the way of it when you try and hit me with blocking and parrying, basically. I can hold my feet and make you miss and make you hit the fresh air by moving my head, or I can use my legs to jump out of range, my footwork. Yeah. So there's not another way to avoid getting punched, is there? The only other thing you could arguably say is you could grab somebody, tie them up, but that's a bit more like a bastardized version. It's not one of the pure groups of defense, I don't think. So I think Floyd had the mastery of all three. I mean, I think Loch looked a lot more kind of, for a highlight really, looked a lot sexier and cooler while he was doing it, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've just never seen anything like it. I'm just getting a new sort of interest in boxing, and I love history of anything, combat sports or anything. And it just come up, and I watched a little clip, a little highlight reel of this guy, and started diving in a little bit more. And they used Mayweather as a reference on there when I was watching some things and like doing a breakdown of how and why he was successful and how and why Mayweather was successful. About that, they would even put themselves against the rope and even put themselves in the corner and not even use any footwork to avoid punches and to tire people out by making them miss time again. It's just amazing.
I'll send you that YouTube video that I did back in 2018.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that.
I proposed that perhaps the 10 best defensive fighters ever, and you know, it's just a quick breakdown on each guy. So I'll see what you think of it, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Ben.
No worries.
100%. Just before we finish on boxing, this Tuesday I've got a new episode of My Story coming out with former professional boxer, world title contender, and of course boxing coach, Mr. Gary Lockett, coming out on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And that's going to be it's a really good one. It's a really interesting chat about, obviously he trains some MMA guys as well with their boxing, and he does a lot with boxers in Wales and stuff like that. It was a really interesting chat, and I got to say I enjoyed speaking to Gary a lot. Are you familiar with Gary Lockett, Ben? What was he like as a fighter? Because I can remember like one or two of his later fights, but
he was definitely a good domestic level fighter. You know, a good career. He fought Kelly Pavlik when he got a shot at a world title. What I always remember about Gary, and we were talking about weight making and coming in bigger, he said in an interview years ago with Boxing News, I think it was, that when he saw Kelly Pavlik at the weigh-in, and Kelly Pavlik was the guy who'd beaten Jermaine Taylor, who'd beaten Bernard Hopkins, who was basically the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. And he said at the weigh-in he looked gaunt and drawn and irritable, and then dry. He said, then I saw him at breakfast the next day, and he said, the sight of him will live with me till the day I die. He looked twice the fucking size. He said, and he said it spooked him. That's one thing I always remember about Gary, and I think he was one of the more outgunned the British in terms of odds, underdog status. He was one of the more kind of up against it British world title challengers abroad. But he's no doubt he's a fine man. He's done really well as a trainer, because not every decent fighter makes a good trainer. So he's obviously had the discipline and the vision and the gifts necessary to excel at that particular trade after he hung his gloves up. So that's a good interview. I'll have a look at that myself.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to talking to him, because obviously I've spoken to a lot of MMA fighters who train with him, and I've spoken to a couple of boxers who train with him. So I'd heard a lot about him and the quality of the man, the quality of the training with him and stuff like that. So I really look forward to then being able to speak to the man who I'd heard a lot about, and he didn't disappoint. Really interesting chat. So that'll be out on Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Right, Ben, as always, absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure we'll see you very soon, mate.
Absolutely. Cheers,
Ben. Another quality couple of guests, mate. I just love this stuff.
I just love picking his brains about some of the boxers in history.
We are truly blessed.
We are lucky.
So it's been a long day for me today, mate. Right. We had UFC Vegas last night. Marlon Vera took Rob Font apart. I know that much. We had Andre Arlovski won as well, very split. Two interesting fights. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen some. Was there anything on the prelims which caught your eye or you've watched?
I don't know whether any of these were on the prelims. I watched from Jotko onwards. Jotko, Elkins, Gordon, and as we go up, Philly.
So Jotko and Meerschaert is on the prelims, as well as Romanov and Chase Sherman. So you can give us a quick overview of both of them if you want.
Jotko and Meerschaert. I always, quite often we'll talk about a fighter and say, "Oh, I can't wait to see him fight again." They're on trajectory upwards. And both these fighters are just showing holes in their game, and their main holes in their game are the way that they hold their guard, the way their form is from the beginning. If you watch Jotko, even when he's successful with his punches, he's throwing his hands forward and leaning back slightly. This is not someone who's got his defensive positioning correct regards his hands or his head movement, and therefore he must be imbalanced. I think the only reason really he was winning over Meerschaert was because he was slightly more athletic and quick. I think that was the biggest difference I saw between them. He was just the better physical individual. I think their skill sets were very, very similar. You just had one man more explosive than the other. Both of them didn't overly impress, and I think fighting at that kind of level in the UFC, I think they're going to struggle to break through to any decent ranking, really, to be taken seriously. Not to say that they can't change it. I mean, they've got as far as getting into UFC, and that's respectful enough for many. But I want to be critiquing these fighters' games to the highest of what I feel I know how. Jotko was looking like the better striker, but I do feel that if he comes up against a real world-class striker, I'm talking world-class striking in terms of MMA, with someone who knows how to cover, and a good demonstration of covering perhaps one of the best in the world, it is Marlon Vera. If you watch how he covers up for punches, with the amount of punches he had to receive, slip and block, he come out pretty unscathed when you add up how many punches that Font are throwing at him. Jotko doesn't have that defense in his game. He was just winning because he was beating his opponents to the punch, so to speak. Weren't overly impressed with both of their performances, and I think if things don't change as they go up through and have their experiences, they're going to experience more losses. That's my take.
Weren't impressed.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't impressed. No, it's not even just about being impressed or not. It's just that I'm trying to forecast what I think what I think I'm going to see when I see them fight in the future. I think other coaches will be seeing this, and other fighters will be seeing this, and being filled with a bit of confidence that there's numerous ways to beat these guys, either or. I mean, Mershot's lost 15 times previously anyway, or 14 times leading up to that fight. So, he's had his fair old share of losses. And I'm not surprised whoever's doing his coaching ain't putting those wrongs right. Or if the coaches are, he's not listening and not adhering to the advice given to him. You can't do that on UFC level. You just cannot do that.
No, you can't. You can't get away with it anymore. Simple as that.
You can't just be an incredible athlete. There's you can even be a non-natural athlete with a determined mind and good coaching and good dietitians. You can become that amazing athlete. It don't always come natural. We've touched on this in podcasts with when we're interviewing people, saying did it come naturally? Just because it comes naturally doesn't mean that you can't become an incredible combat sport person.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's not as simple as just being. Yeah,
absolutely.
I get what you mean. So then you had obviously the Romanov fight. You watched that as well, did you?
The next one up from that was Elkins and Connolly. If you're going to do it in order.
All right, Elkins and Connolly was the first one on the main card. So go on.
Right. Yeah. Kind of good fight. I was expecting more from Connolly. He looked a little lackluster. The commentators picked up on this, that he was kind of like hitting thin air. I don't know whether he's just struggling to measure up his opponent, but he just seemed to be struggling with his striking out at range. Didn't seem to know how to get in, and Elkins was taking advantage of this by shooting under him and taking him down. Elkins was having to work hard at times, and Connolly did make a fight of it, partly because Elkins was making hard work of it, to be honest, at times, and allowing Connolly sort of like back in to make a fight of things. I just think a lot of the reason why Elkins was winning was because Connolly was allowing it, pretty much. I don't know whether there's something wrong with his weight cut. It just looked a little lackluster. Just didn't look strong. Even though he looked strong physically, his movements didn't look strong to me. Something was amiss, I feel. Now, sometimes a lot of people don't realise this, but different venues have different lighting, and that can really change your perception of range. And for some people, this is not an issue, but for others, it can be. So whether that was an issue, I don't know. But I was expecting more from Connolly. It sounds like it was a night of disappointment for me. Maybe we've been spoilt with such high-level fighting so often that now just by chance we've had a few lower down the rankings fight, and I'm picking them apart a little bit here. But Elkins, he's fighting whoever he's up against at the end of the day, and he's got to perform to who he's up against, and he did enough to get the win. He had some good spells, but he also had some spells where he let Connolly in and having a chance, but the chances were never enough for Connolly to change the result, unfortunately for him.
Yeah. So next up, Grant Dawson versus Jared Gordon, mate.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. Gordon always looked like the one that could do the damage if he could have stayed on his feet, but long enough. But just kept getting taken down and getting his pack taken. Dawson's just so good at controlling the back position. Was being fairly aggressive there. It's kind of hard to be aggressive there, although you think a back position, you would think you could be highly effective in terms of aggression. But it's actually really hard to hit someone because their face is facing away from you. But he was able to look fairly aggressive there in a way to keep Gordon guessing on what was coming regards to submission attempts thereafter. But Gordon was doing a really good job of defending him. He started looking like he might have some kind of hope to turn the fight around and steal it from Dawson. That would have meant stopping him in the third round. But again, exposed his back and Dawson was straight on it again, for which we ended up seeing Gordon succumb to that rear naked choke eventually. And I think it was largely to do with Dawson's work ethic on the back, that he wasn't just going to be there swapping arm positions trying to do the choke. He was actually going to hit and strike and score from there, as well as perhaps cause an element of confusion for Gordon to try and trick his arm into position. But he got it eventually. A pretty good fight to watch. I enjoyed it. It was quite obvious who wanted to be where and what their intentions were when they were there. But it was Dawson who was able to keep it in his arena and to come off with another effective win. Look, Dawson's kind of up there now. He's 18-0, 18-1, 19-1, something like that. His results are now. So, he's someone to start sitting up, taking note of, beginning to get to the position of making noises in that division.
Interesting. Then we got Joe Anderson Brito defeated Andre Fili via TKO.
I knew this was going to be a banger of a fight, but I thought it was going to go on longer. Fili is quite long and rangy, very, very explosive, got good hands and kicks. He normally manages range very, very well. Whether this is just one of those things by chance, I don't know, but Brito knocked Fili off his feet and followed up with a big flurry. Being so early on in the first round is obviously full of energy. And the thing is that if you hurt someone so early on and it goes to the ground or they fall to the ground, it's a good tactic just to jump down there and just go on a mad flurry. Because even if you're not really devastatingly hurting them further, the ref is inclined to step in and stop it because it looks barbaric pretty much. And does, of course, protect the fighter from potential harm, because Fili was having to shell up somewhat and some of the shots were getting through. I don't think Fili was hurt. He stood straight up afterwards, but I think fighters are beginning to realise tactically you can't get knocked off your feet and you can't just shell up. You've got to be fighting back. And now Fili did try, but the barrage coming from Brito was so thick and fast that he chose just to take the referee intervention rather than, perhaps having the fight stopped outright with a knockout, with the barrage of hammer fists and punches that were coming down at him. Kind of disappointed for Fili, really, because Fili, to me, in my mind, he's one of the top fighters up there. Someone that could take on anyone in the division on his given day, but it just wasn't his night that night. But well done to Brito. He's looking good, looking strong, and that was a great scalp for him to take. He moves on up.
He does. Yes, he does. I thought he looked very, very impressive doing so. Would have been nice if it had gone a bit longer, I guess. Andre Arlovski keeps on winning and defeated Jake Collier via a split decision. Maybe controversial, maybe not. Who knows?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I thought Collier did enough. I'd have to look at the fight again, but I don't know whether I would want to. It wasn't the kind of fight you would want to see again. Although I did enjoy watching it at the time, it was not interesting enough for me to watch it again. But I might have to just to see whether my first conclusion, was right. In that, I think I was thinking Collier was going to win it after the fight had been done. But I love Arlovski. He's one of the veterans that are in there, been in there for so many decades and still performing in a way where he could beat anyone on any given day. He still was quite diverse in his approach to the fight, which we've seen in recent times with Arlovski. Really changed his fighting style, largely to do with the camp that he's gone under and the coach that he's gone under, doing a great work to keep his strengths of old and then changing, adding things of new into his game, keeping him relevant. And I love Arlovski's honesty in two ways: that his intentions are to have a dig at the title again, to take that title again, and also to know that performance wasn't enough if he wants to keep that dream alive. I think he knew that was a close fight. He knew perhaps it should have gone the other way. And he knew that night, although other nights where the judges may have gone against him, because I think it has in the past, this particular night it went in his favour. So I think he should just, walk away from this one, smile that he got away with it, carry on try to improve his game, for which we've seen constantly, even though he's a true veteran in his mid-40s, or 43 now. Let's see what Arlovski can do next time. I'll be interested to see who they'll put up against him next. Do
you honestly think, or do you think there's any way we ever see Andre Arlovski go for the title again?
I would say unlikely. I say unlikely, but not impossible. And I'm saying not impossible because he's opened himself up to being modified and changed, and obviously responding to it well, in that he's gone with this new team. And we have seen a new improved version of Arlovski. I mean, his head position, footwork, head movement is all been mildly improved. And when I say mildly, in each area, that makes a big difference. There were times in the past where he was still trying to overtrade shots and knock people out, and you have to be in the pocket to do that. And he was getting knocked out, and people were writing off Arlovski, saying that his chin's gone. I just think that the level was incrementally improving, and he was staying the same. And people had many fights to study of him, and were finding openings. I don't think that his chin had gone at the time. I just think he was getting found out with the
leaving his chin out there, wasn't he?
He was just the same person. He had been for years before. People had studied that, and these advanced gyms are coaching now, and even fighters in their own right can fathom out ways of finding ways around someone that's fighting stylistically the same way each time. Arlovski's not done that now. He's changed his game up, and I really think had he been fighting the way that he used to fight, he would have been retired probably 3 years ago. But look, he's changed things up, and he's still getting wins and having close fights with these young big men. It's really impressive, and hats off to him. I've got so much respect for him that he's still got the vigor to want to push towards having that title. I would say largely, look, if you're going to be in UFC, you want to be in UFC because you want to be a UFC champion. You shouldn't really be in there just because you enjoy fighting. I wouldn't say that's the arena, the level of the arena you need to be hanging around. If that's so, for him to say that is really heartwarming, and makes me feel that, well, as long as he's got that fire in his belly and those ambitions and that belief that he can do it, he's going to be dangerous for anyone to fight.
Yeah, and I am impressed by, even at his age and his experience, that he's still learning. You see differences in his last couple of fights where he's changed teams and he's addressing certain things. And I think sometimes these really, really experienced fighters, they don't always do that because they kind of feel like they're too long in the tooth to be changed. And
agreed.
At the end of the day, we say it's unlikely he will see him for another title. I think any fight is only 4 or 5 knockouts or impressive performances away from a title shot ever. Even outside of the rankings, if you have 5 incredible performances knocking people out, you're going to get a title shot. It's just the way the business is these days. I think 5 exceptional performances, and when you've already got the name that he has, whilst he might not be the same guy of old, 3 exceptional performances from now, I don't think it's unrealistic to say he could be fighting.
It is possible. I just, I'll maintain, I think most people agree. I think you would agree. So it's unlikely, but not impossible. I mean, I feel a little sorry for Jake Collier, to be honest, because it was a good performance. I think this kid's really quite good, really quite something. It doesn't look like your typical fighter that should succeed in the modern arena physically. He carried a bit of mid-drift, but he actually uses that to his advantage. He's pressing Arlovski up against the cage after exchanging the punches very, very well. Even threw some nice meaning kicks. He threw a high kick up at Arlovski and a body kick, and it had some real substance behind it. The kid's got some skills. It won't be the last we'll see of him. I just hope he isn't.
I think he'll be disappointed.
Yeah, he will be.
He'll be very disappointed.
UFC sees past that performance and give him a fair crack.
You'd like to think they would, though, wouldn't you? But you just never know, I guess. And then we had Marlon Vera beat Rob Font via a unanimous decision. Marlon Vera, I thought, was pretty
He's incredible, but so was Rob Font. Let's not take it away from Rob Font.
God, yeah.
I mean, he's so good to watch. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Frankie Edgar in that he's very, very lively. Perhaps, not mucking around with his footwork and not actually throwing anything out as much as Frankie Edgar. But he was constantly moving forward and going in with his hands and was kind of overrunning Marlon Vera in terms of work rate in the first couple of rounds. But it was always Marlon that was hurting Font. It was always hurting him at the end of the rounds and ended up on top. There was a clear disparity of power difference between them and perhaps precision as well. But I don't think there was anything wrong as such with Rob Font's precision. It was just Marlon Vera's incredible tight defense. I mean, he was so relaxed there. If you have a look at the punch stats at the end of that fight for Rob Font throwing shots out of Vera, is huge, a huge amount of shots. And Marlon Vera had come out of it largely unscathed. It's something that I bang on about a lot in my gym. If you want to be one of the best strikers, you've got to have your defenses in order. And that makes you a great counter fighter and a great aggressive fighter, because you're going to have so much confidence in that correct defense and that awareness and head position and the way you locate your chin so you don't get knocked out when one does get through. It's so utterly important, because you can become a real predator. And Marlon Vera showed all these qualities. The only thing I would have said was I felt like he waited a little too long. It was right at the end of the rounds when he was getting successful. I do feel with that cardio that Marlon Vera seems to possess, I do feel like he could up perhaps his work rate and perhaps pressure back a little bit. I do think he was settling a little bit back, yeah, a little bit, maybe too much. Now, I think this is largely due to him knowing that there was 5 rounds to be had here, and he knows he's going to come on strong, and he just stays relaxed. I think perhaps over 3 rounds, we might see a little bit more urgency in his game, but I would just perhaps like to see about a 15% more increment of forward aggression from him, being that he's got that such good awareness and defense, and those kicks as well. I mean, he has a real rounded game regards his striking. He had heel kicks that are effective, side kicks, round kicks, and really good hands as well. When he threw, he was predominantly landing. He's really, really picking his shots, although they were in short order in terms of the amount that he was throwing out compared to Rob Font. When he was throwing, he was landing, and the significant strike difference between them was not very large at the end of each round. So Rob Font was missing having a lot of his strikes blocked. But Marlon Vera, it was a good tactic overall, and it showed through, and he was outright winner.
Do you think Rob Font would be a little bit disappointed with the outcome?
Absolutely, because look, he clearly trains incredibly hard to get as fit as he does. But look at the state of him as well. I mean, his face was hurting him. You could see some of the strikes were making him backpedal when he had been forward coming for so much of the fight. And I think it's one of the jumping knees Vera did. He really swelled up the forehead of Font, and I think every little scathing shot that was going through was hurting him. It was a painful experience to watch, but what a brilliant fight. I mean, Font shouldn't be disappointed regards what he put into that fight. He should obviously be disappointed he didn't get the result that he was so wanting, and against most people would have folded with that pressure that Font put on Vera. But Marlon Vera's defense was that good. He could survive those rounds and come back with his own, and when he was coming back, he was just doing more damage, and that was a simple fact of the whole fight. Each round was demonstrated in that case. If Rob Font wants to fight Marlon Vera again at some point in the future, which I think they will, Font's going to have to come up with a different game plan. And I think that's to work in bursts and have some elusivity there, so he ain't working so hard that he is a state of tiredness at the end of these rounds, that when he gets hit, gets hurt, he don't have that energy to scramble back up to his feet and get out of trouble. Because when he was getting hurt, he had to settle for his back because he was so tired from that work ethic that he'd been investing in the round for those 4 minutes 30 before he was getting hurt and getting knocked down. Because it was in the last minute, 30 seconds of each round that he was getting hurt and put on his back. I mean, he's literally not getting knocked off his feet. He was getting hit, rocked and hurt and having to sit back because it was having such a traumatic effect on him. I mean, I was almost feeling his pain watching the performance. I really was. But my God, Marlon Vera, I mean, who next for him? He's got to be coming out to contender.
Yeah, I don't think he's far. And I think the nature of the performance and the damage and everything kind of points that way now, doesn't it? He'd be surprised if he wasn't in that title contention very, very soon in the next fight or two. So just to finish us off, mate, we had a couple of little announcements this week. UFC London again, coming up 23rd of June, I think it is. First fight announced, or I think is pretty much confirmed, is Darren Till versus Jack Hermansson. I think that's a
good fight for Darren Till. Yeah,
and I think Darren Till is going to be very keen to find the get back on the winning trail. Obviously, missed out on the previous UFC London.
Yes.
When I was speaking to John just before when we were waiting for you, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying it was off air, but he said he thought some of the bigger fighters who fought on this UFC London might not fight on the next one because it'd be a bit too soon.
Maybe so, yeah.
Like, there's a couple, but then there's been rumours that it's going to be Tom Aspinall versus who was it? Curtis Blades, which everyone was waiting for the Tai Tuivasa fight, but I think Curtis Blades is a really interesting one for Tom Aspinall.
Yeah, yes.
That is a good one, because I think when you look at that top 5 in the heavyweight division, we know what Cyril Garnier is around about. I actually think Tom Aspinall beats Garnier, and I think he probably beats Tai Tuivasa. I think Curtis Blades offers a different set of problems to those two. Does that make sense? I think, like, even though I'd rate Cyril Garnier as the better fighter out of the three, out of Tai Tuivasa, Garn, and Curtis Blades, I think Curtis Blades offers something completely different to the other two.
I agree. Yeah, he's got that explosiveness and that size that could just interrupt Aspinall's cool composure that he's been demonstrating. I absolutely agree
with that. Everything, isn't he?
He is so good at everything. And if you're going to beat him, you have to kind of break through and get dirty and get explosive and rough him up a little bit. But
can Curtis Blades do that? Can you see Curtis Blades doing that?
I think he's got more chance of doing that than some of the others that you're saying, but largely because, and he is not as good a fighter, I agree, as some other people in that division, but he could bring something that could, no, I don't even want to say pose, he could pose any kind of problem to him, I guess, if he does the right thing. But I just think we might see Aspinall have to do something defensively and actually have to counter, and
maybe.
He ain't going to sit back and sit behind something. He's going to find his opportunities to go and get at Aspinall, and I think that'll be interesting for all to see.
Maybe we might see it.
We might see it. Yeah, I mean, come on, we want Aspinall to win. We want him to go all the way. At the end of the day, I mean, I'm such a big fan of his.
He's been incredible.
His last performance. Each performance, I'm like, wow, this kid. I get excited to see his name come up when I know he's going to be fighting on UFC every time.
This is an all-round game, my friend, isn't it? It's just incredible.
It is.
It makes you excited. So it'll be interesting. I hope Jack Shaw is on that card. He deserves it. He's in the rankings. I would like to see him on the main card. I think he deserves that slot. He said he wanted to fight before July, so hopefully he'll be on that. Wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if Paddy will be on it. The last I saw, Paddy was still looking a bit fed, shall we say. But I mean, what are we? 1st of May today, so what's that? 6 weeks? Yeah, it's probably a bit. You'd think if the ones who are going to fight on it would already have to be in camp. So I'm looking at the ones who, who fought on the original card. You got Jack. I think Jack could go. I think Corey.
I just think it's unlikely. I think they're going to want to get a mix of British fighters on there. They're not going to just keep.
Who else is there? Who didn't get on that card? Who's in the UFC? LeBron Murphy is one, isn't it? You've got obviously Nathaniel Wood's fight got pulled.
Yeah.
So you could get him on there.
Yeah.
Who else is there? I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
that Darren Stewart? Could he end up?
Darren Stewart, yeah, maybe. I wonder if they might pick a couple of Cage Warriors guys, Dan. You know,
it could
maybe.
Could be
hey?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I hope so.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm funny, and I. No, as always, mate. It's a pleasure. Sorted out your trip to Cardiff yet?
Not yet, because Jordan,
you've got no excuse.
Many people know, they've had their baby now, and he's experienced direct fatherhood now. So, but yeah, he's taking it like duck to water. I mean, he brings the young one, and he comes training. I even saw on a little video clip that he took baby Gray when he went to go do his fitness. He put him in his little carry, and there he is doing all these pull-ups and training. I mean, yeah, Jordan's dedicated. You don't have to worry about that. But we will be getting up to Cardiff. Don't you worry.
Good man. I did tell him that once he has that baby, like he will everything will change about how you view everything.
Oh yeah.
I've said it to friends before, and I think sometimes they don't quite realise it's difficult to explain to someone when they haven't experienced it. Like, if you haven't got kids, like it's impossible to make someone understand that change.
It's very hard. It is very hard.
It's just because until it happens, you don't know it and you don't feel
your
it.
Your life ain't your own anymore when you have kids. Your life ain't your own. But it enhances your life.
Absolutely.
I mean, for some it doesn't, but there's some unfortunate situations why that wouldn't be the case. But for me, fatherhood is an amazing gift into my life, and something that, well, I can't imagine my life without no more. And it made even my relationship with my own parents different, because I started to believe all that. You don't know how much we love you and care for you and what we've done for you. It made me realize all this, and perhaps it had a little bit more, more weight behind all the things that they'd been saying over the years.
Spot on, 100%, mate. Right, guys, girls, check out my story with Gary Lockett on Tuesday. It's a really good one. I got to say, like, I know I say that a lot, but it is a really, really good one. Particularly if you like boxing and MMA, but just generally, it's a good one. Gary's a really interesting guy. You'll have seen him on Sky Sports a lot doing punditry. He's very comfortable in front of the camera. So he came down to the studio in Cardiff. Obviously, Eat Sleep Media filmed my podcast for me, and it's a beautiful thing. So check that out. The audio version of this show will be out in the morning. So if you're listening, welcome. Cheers. Danny, as always, is a pleasure. And I will see you next Monday next week, because it's my wedding anniversary on the Sunday. So we're doing the show on the Monday. We bid you farewell. See you next week. Have a great week. Enjoy yourselves. It's later.
Next week.